Welcome to Psychiatry with Borders, another episode where we explore innovative mental health initiatives from around the globe. Today, we are joined by Dr. Dominique Calilung, a psychiatrist from Philippines. She is an international medical graduate currently training in forensic psychiatry in the UK. Beyond her clinical role, Dominique is a passionate mental health advocate, serving as the communications consultant for Mental Health PH, a leading nonprofit NGO in the Philippines dedicated to mental health awareness and digital initiatives. During the pandemic, Dominic spearheaded various digital health projects, including MH Talks, a YouTube live stream series, and Viber-based mental health discussions. These are innovative solutions tailored for low bandwidth users. Her work highlights how digital platforms can bridge the gap in mental health support, particularly in resource limited settings. Today, we will dive into her experience as a global mental health advocate, the challenges and successes of promoting mental well being in a low middle income countries, and how social media is transforming mental health educations. So, Dominic, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Hi, Anis. I'm doing well, thank you. It's good to be here. I appreciate being on your podcast.
It is honors is ours, uh, getting the chance to learn mental health advocates across the globe. Where are you now?
So I'm from the Philippines. I'm an international medical graduate. I moved to the UK in 2020 during the pandemic to start my first job in the UK, and from there I did my core training, and now I'm in Bristol as a specialty registrar in forensic psychiatry.
It must be very busy schedules working as a higher trainee in forensic psychiatry and doing the mental health advocacy. So, how is life treating you?
I would say it's a good kind of busy because the more I am in psychiatry, the more I realize that I actually really like it and I like being that kind of clinician in mental health. I do balance it in higher training. There is a special interest session as clinical and non-clinical. So I think with the current structure, despite being busy, we're allowed, we have more time to do the things that we like to do outside hospital.
I'm impressed with your flexibility. I believe you're on call tomorrow. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. So by 9 a.m. But yeah, but again, like I said, I think it's because the nature of the work, it's something that, we're passionate about. So yeah, hopefully it will be okay.
Of course, it will be okay. And I'm really glad that you make some time this Friday evening for our podcast. Now, let's start with your journey. Tell us, how did you get involved with mental health PH initiative in Philippines?
Yes, so interestingly, it began in the pandemic, and I just told you that's the year that I flew to the UK. So I just received my certificate of sponsorship to start my non-training job, which was in York, and because of the global lockdown, I couldn't fly yet, and I was, I guess I was really looking forward to starting my training, but at the same time, I just wanted to give support, to people around me, and I thought, what better way could I do that, and just realized you have a computer in front of you, there's Wi-Fi, and so a quick Google search, how to help with mental health for Filipinos. Mental health PH website came up, and from there I just emailed the committee, the co-founders, and then eventually I found myself in a team where we were developing like a YouTube series. So this was live streamed. We ended up reaching out to consultant psychiatrists, practicing consultant psychiatrists in hospitals in the Philippines, to talk about certain relevant topics about the pandemic. For example, cabin fever, heightened anxiety on a global level, because nobody saw this coming. Nobody knows when this will end. And for example, how to look after our elderly, which was the more vulnerable population at the time, and looking after our elderly is actually one of the deeply rooted things in our culture. So it ended up being with 6 episodes, and the feedback was overwhelmingly positive that even after the pandemic. I think there were like 2 or 3 more seasons of the MH Talks series on YouTube. It's still there. If you just Google it again, all the episodes will come up. So yeah, that was quite an experience.
Great. So basically, it all started with a good intention from your part, and you reach out through Google, and everything just unfolded it on its own. So I
Yes,
think
very
basically,
quickly. Yeah.
yep. So basically, this is a message for our members who wanted to do volunteering. Just take a baby steps, and you never know which door would open for you. Now, tell me, do you have any stories to tell how this web-based platform has impact on the audiences in Philippines?
Yes, absolutely. So, I'll just briefly talk about the project first that led to this story about well, not a service user, but a Filipino who was struggling with mental health issues. So at the time, I also spearheaded a Viber chat, which you mentioned earlier. So again, it's similar in a way like the MH Talks on YouTube, but because this is now um it's held in Viber, which is a cross-platform instant messaging and voice over software application. So we delivered talks there as well, around mental health. And there because Mental Health PH has several we have several platforms. So we're on Twitter. So we're on X, formerly Twitter. We're on YouTube, Viber. So there was a girl who reached out to us on Twitter via the MHPH channel, and she just wanted to talk to somebody. And she did mention that she was afraid to open up to her parents. I think because mental illness has incredible stigma still in the Philippines, especially around families and friends. And so what happened was because of the limited characters on Twitter, I think it's like 200 plus, so you can't really say much. But she wanted to be heard, so she posted on the platform. And from there, I just kind of redirected her, like, actually, we're doing this mental health series on Viber. Would you like to come? Would you like to join? Would you like to, read the messages? Because we invite speakers from that as well. Like, even ophthalmologists who say that actually the more you do screen time, that can increase your eye strain and even affect your stress, and that compounds into like mental health stress. So after that, I think it was just the Viber channel that we started communicating, and from there, I signposted her to the different confidential helplines that is actually available in the Philippines. And tell you what, before I actually joined Mental Health PH, I was not even aware that there are agencies out there back home. Despite the stigma, despite the limited resources, there are actually people who wish to help. And sometimes I think it's the lack of accessibility and knowledge or access to that knowledge that's kind of impeding people. So for this girl who I think she was like 16 or 17, I think that really, really impacted on her mental health at that time. I think she did end up finding a psychologist. I'm not in touch with her anymore, but yeah, it's really changed how she's perceived, help seeking behavior. It's okay to not be comfortable to open up to your family. That's okay, but just do realize that there are other people out there. And I think with technology, it's just it's unbelievable how technology has really played a role, like digital health interventions, innovative solutions. So yeah, that's in one example.
I think it's a really a good case you made how a simple act from your end as a psychiatrist can have a huge impact to that young person's life, because that young person's whole life is laying ahead, and the intervention that you have offered to her, signposting, probably have changed the direction of our life from the wrong to the right pathway. Now, for our audiences, remind us, I understand Philippines is one of the country which has a high youth populations and high mobile user. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I think, yes, statistics show that the Philippines is, I think, I would say, heaviest in mobile phone usage. I think an average of 6 hours a day. Yes, I can confirm that.
Okay. And then technology is available to the young people uh, uh, more or less in all part of the Philippines. Is that correct?
It's interesting point you say that. So despite the frequency of the time spent in using mobile phones, I would say the access, or at least maybe, for example, like internet speeds, bandwidth, it's still very limited. It's usually concentrated in the cities. Um, so it's a good thing you mentioned that, because MHPH, mental health PH, does acknowledge it, and that's one of the main drivers of how we think of solutions. So how do we widen accessibility? So despite the mobile phone usage, what platforms can we utilize, using low bandwidth? For example, right now, this our call could end, right? And then that's the end of our podcast, or we'd have to restart. But with things like X or Viber, it's messaging, so you can just pick up at a later time. We're not limited by how fast our internet or how slow our Wi-Fi speeds are.
That's a very good point. So remind us, the Viber is the same as WhatsApp. Is that correct?
So I think they're both. I think the design is very similar. Yes, it's instant messaging, and there's also like voice over platform, cross platform. Yeah.
Okay. So with the Twitter, you can have a channel where you
Mhm.
can discuss in general about uh, issues that affect people's life in terms of their mental well-being. From that discussions, any of the audience can pick up. They can send a message to you, but it is a limited, right? Word
Yeah.
limited. They can't do more than 200 characters,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So for the conversation to go on, you would move
Hmm.
to the Viber.
Absolutely. And I think it's good to highlight that, for example, on X, they have I think they've even increased the character length, but I believe these are for subscribers, so there are some financial constraints. Not everybody is able to upgrade to a premium service, but with other software applications out there, it's doable.
Okay. Good. And in addition to these two platforms, you can signpost them to listen to your YouTube channels.
Yes, so those currently, the one on YouTube, all the episodes are there. On X, there is the weekly, I think thrice monthly uh tweet chat initiative called, if I could just say it, so it's called Usap Tayo. Usap Tayo is Tagalog for let's talk. So if you put a hashtag as hashtag Usap Tayo, and then that's how with Twitter works, right? You type in a hashtag, and then the texts where the word was typed in, it comes up. So again, this can happen live, but at the same time, if you just wanted to look over previous conversations with the mental health PH, then you just do that, type in the hashtag.
Can you tell us in a typical live X sessions, how many people
Mm.
would join conversation?
So gosh, so that's interesting point. So we've actually made collaborations with prominent figures in the Philippines, so there were points where we invited a celebrity who was willing to share their story with mental health. So we did start small, but there was a time I remember when we had this like a live chat on Twitter. I think more than 1,000 people came up, and it crashed because there was too many users, because I think this celebrity was really like on a global scale. And so we've got like Filipino fans, not just from the Philippines, logging in. It was called Twitter then. So I would say it's really variable, but it's enough to like to crash the platform.
So it is very successful media to reach people.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So Facebook, I think currently 100,000 followers on Instagram. There's about 11,000, I think, and then TikTok 20,000. So yeah, it is branching out. And I really think it will continue to grow, especially with social media and digital health innovations becoming more noticeable.
Very impressive. Now that leads me to another questions that you mentioned something about that internet access is only in the city areas. So in the rural areas,
Yeah.
are there any problem with the stigma or accessing the mainstream mental health services?
Absolutely. So I'll give you actually factual figures here. So currently, I think as of 2020, um with the population, like the whole population in the country, there's only about 3 to 4 psychiatrists per like 100,000. It's something like that, but really, really, there's such a huge shortage of psychiatrists back home, and most of them are practicing in urbanized areas. So with the far-flung areas, plus the stigma, it's really a struggle for people in rural and the provinces to, first of all, to open up, to seek help, and then to actually obtain that help. So sometimes people even travel, like they walk, it takes them days to actually visit the nearest rural hospital. And again, the hospitals are so few in number as well, more so for the mental health facilities. So that's accessibility is a problem. And I think as well, the farther you go from the city, the stigma is more felt. And also, I think in the Philippines, mental illness, there's a lot of shame wrapped up in it, as well as I would say like a failure in spirituality, where I know that religion can be protective, but sometimes the severity of the mental health issue reaches a certain point where you may need professional help, and that becomes a problem on how to get that specific help.
Okay, I think this is a very common scenario we come across all over the world. The spiritual support uh, is positive, has positive impact. We know, particularly the suicide prevention. But when the illness took the better part of it, then
Mm.
they do need a professional mental health support, and the work need to be collaborative. I think this is where I wonder whether the spiritual healers uh, in in your part of the world
Mm.
are aware of the mental health support system that is available where they could signpost.
So at the moment, I'm not aware that there is, for example, a more formalized support amongst that spiritual healers can deliver to Filipinos, especially, in the far-flung areas. But I really believe there is so much potential to take this further. They are well learned, they are well informed about certain physical symptoms. Um, but at the same time, I do feel that they can be informed about mental illness as well. I think that's something that the Philippines should tap into.
Definitely, our members could also reach out about these initiatives. So, what would you suggest our members who wanted to get involved with the great initiative that you have taken? How could they reach out and how could they contribute?
So I guess my tiny bit of advice would be just be curious, and you could do the same thing as I did. It's a simple email, like all how to there's a contact us page on the website mentalhealthph.org. You can even send me an email because that's how things start, just expressing your curiosity. And I think one of the volunteers, if you want to get further involved with the initiatives back in the Philippines, I think one of the a great idea would be psychoeducation, kind of translating medical information into bite-sized, laymanized, destigmatized language. Um, because mental illness can be such a difficult thing to talk about, especially with countries like the Philippines. And if we just help each other figuring out how best to explain it. And sometimes, I think mental health PH would be willing to collaborate in translating, English to Tagalog. And sometimes actually I'll tell you, people in the Philippines, if you express things in Taglish, so it's a mix of Tagalog and English rather than just English, they will actually feel less intimidated, and it will be a more conversational and approachable approachable conversation, approachable discourse. So yeah, I think psychoeducation is great. For example, with CBT, reframing thoughts, how can this be applied to the Philippines, or how can we adapt it to culture and customs? So yeah, so reach out. We're just here, just around.
I think you put a very important point out here, because sometimes people may think that only solutions for health-related problem is medications. They do underestimate the power of talking therapy. For example, CBT is one of the uh, good way to psychoeducate people, that it works even in the developed country. So I think that will give people confidence if they hear how we use the CBT here in UK, and our members can spell this out to wider audience, and it will have much more acceptance, because otherwise, as I said, that one in some culture, illness, they equate it with physical interventions. um, whereas we know many cases of mental illness, yes, they do need medications, but it's a biopsychosocial interventions for a
Yeah.
better outcome in the long run. So I'm pretty sure our members will reach out to you in terms of how they could contribute, telling their stories, or spelling out their expertise. Here, maybe another thing, I wonder whether you could think of any use in terms of niche specialties. Are there any demand for psychoeducation or training of the niche specialties in Philippines where our members can chip in?
Um, could you explain that a little bit further?
For example, in many countries, there is nothing much awareness about the eating disorder,
Uh-huh.
or forensic psychiatry and other specialties.
Yes.
So, and then we also have other niche specialties such as perinatal mental health.
Mm.
So, do you think these are the areas where our members can contribute to raise awareness or to provide some basic trainings to professionals?
Yes, absolutely. So I can name a few. So you mentioned forensic psychiatry. So in the Philippines at the moment, the Philippines has its own forensic psychiatry training, but it's very, very new, like literally, I think less than 5 years. So I think in terms of, you know, providing teaching for that, how the criminal justice systems overlap with like mental illness, that's one. Number two would be, I think the Philippines has really struggled with such a huge jump in suicide rates. That's since 2020. So I guess like suicidology, and looking into preventive work, relapse approaches, and safety plan. I think the safety plan really needs would be beneficial from our volunteers if they could share knowledge into that, especially because again we're so constrained by the stigma. It's hard to open up, so that leads to the risks, isn't it? Such that it's not manageable anymore, and we don't see it coming.
Oh, that's great. Our time is almost up. So just one thing I wanted to understand from our discussions. Did you mention that English is well understood in Philippine, or did you say that it's like a English and the Filipino combination language that
Oh
has
yeah, the
more appeal?
Taglish, yeah, yeah. So
Okay.
I would say English is a very widely spoken language in the Philippines. English, sometimes tourists don't even need to learn our language to stay there. But in terms of talking about difficult topics such as mental health, mental illness, sharing our our deepest thoughts and feelings, I think having it in plain English will be a hindrance, especially to I would say, the majority of the population. There's something about the Tagalog, or our Filipino language, and also Tagalog is not the only Filipino language. So by now I'm speaking about, the different Filipino languages. If we combine that with English, I think we can definitely strip away a layer of hesitation and fear. So I think, yeah, definitely. Mixed languages, I would say that's best for first for beginning to have, the much needed conversations.
Okay, so that's great. So basically, our members can contribute through English, but they would need some support from local hosts like this NGO that you mentioned. So they can.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's brilliant. Our time is up now. So, Dr. Dominic, it has been truly and inspiring to hear about your journey, your work with mental health PH, and how digital platform can be powerful tools for mental health advocacy. Thank you for sharing your insights and for the incredible work you do bridging mental health support between the Philippines and the UK. And to our listeners, if you or someone you know is working on innovative mental health initiatives, we'd love to hear your story. Psychiatry Without Borders is about exploring diverse perspectives and highlighting the incredible work happening across the world. If you're interested in being a guest on this podcast, reach out to us. Let's continue these important conversations and work towards a more connected, accessible, and inclusive approach to mental health. Until next time, take care and keep the conversation going. Thank you, Dr. Dominic, for joining us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Bye.